Hello guys, and welcome to my Frostmage build. This is an exciting build for you guys. It was a build that I put together with the intent to just be a Frostmage. I really wanted to just have a, an ice-based Magica build, I just wanted to be the Frostmage. I wanted to use just cold to kill stuff. Now, this build is really cool, guys. It is a massive AoE damage build. It has a huge amount of survivability, and then on top of it, it is an excellent AoE control build. My recommended races for this would be High Elf, Dark Elf, and then Breton in that order. So yeah, we're going to jump into the build video, guys. I hope you like it. Let's check it out. Let's take a look at the stat page. We've got just about 35k max Magica, 25k health, 10k stamina, just about 2,000 spell damage on the Destro bar, and then on my dual wield bar, 2,200 spell damage. When I buff with the potion, I come up to 2,650 on the dual wield and 2,000, just about 2,400 on my Destro bar, and I have 71% spell crit fully buffed. So I've got a huge amount of spell critical on this build. This is a primarily spell critical build, so we'll go over why I have to have such a big spell crit for this setup as we go through the build. So another thing to note is that this spell damage value is not including my Ysgramor set. I do have a Ysgramor set on, giving me 391 spell damage to my cold abilities. So this means that with my Frost Staff out, I'm looking at around 3,000 spell damage for my Frost abilities, and then on my dual wield bar, about 3,200 spell damage for my Frost abilities. If we look at our stats here, I've got a decent amount of penetration, just taken out of our light armor passives there. My critical resistance is 677. Now, that's because I have the wrong traits for my gear. Ideally on this build, you shouldn't be running any impen, because it is a shield-based build, so impen is kind of wasted on it. My physical and spell resists, they aren't terrible, but they're definitely not a shining part of this build. When I buff up with my channeled focus, they get to about 15k physical resist, not bad for light armor at all, and then about 19k spell resistance. The boon that I'm using is the Thief. This is a crit-based Magica build, so the Thief is very important for it. And then finally, I am a vampire. Vampirism is not important for this build. I don't use anything from the vampirism aspects for it. This is just a personal choice for my character. The food you're going to use on this build is the max health and max Magica food to buff that max health and max Magica values. Your stamina is going to be pretty low. You can always do tri-stat food if you find that you're running out of stamina too fast or that 10k isn't a big enough pool for you to play in PvP. And then finally, guys, the last bit of consumable that I use for the build is where they hide an Essence of Spell Power. Give you Major Sorcery, increasing your spell damage by 20%, Major Prophecy, giving you 10% bonus to your critical, and finally, Restoring Magica. So, this build does not have a lot of sustain from the stat page that it looks like, but when you play this build right, it has a lot of staying power and it is very, very powerful. And that's just kind of how the build works, and of course keeping up your damage shields and your healing circles is a big part of it. So let's take a look at the gear, guys. What do we got for gear here? We're going to start off with Ice Heart. So we've got a 2-piece Ice Heart on. This is one of the new monster sets that ZeniMax introduced with one Tamriel. One piece gives me spell critical, and then the 2-piece, when I deal critical damage, I have a 20% chance to gain a 5k damage shield. Keep in mind, guys, I am in PvP, so outside of PvP, this value would be doubled. So it gives me a 5k damage shield, and as the shield holds, it'll deal 1k cold damage every second to targets 5 meters around me. Now, this set is so great, guys. This is like your offensive-defensive set. It's like the opposite of an offensive proc set. As you're fighting your opponents, what this set will do is it will shield you pretty much for fighting offensively. So it's very good for PvP, because in PvP you'll often find that the times you get bursted down is when you're going on the offensive, and this is going to give you that protection when you want to hit people hard and you want to deal your damage. The next set that I'm running is the 5-piece Ysgramor, guys. I've got it on my ring, my clothes here, and then finally I've got it on my staff. Now, Ysgramor is such a great set for the Frostmage. This was built just for a cold mage. Adds 391 spell damage to your cold abilities on the 5-piece. Of course, it's giving you max health, max Magica, and spell damage getting up there. So there you have it. This is a set that works perfectly for this build because I am using primarily cold damage abilities. I have the Ysgramor set on both swaps, so I've got the Ysgramor Axe as well as the Staff. Frost Staff and the Axe. And then finally, the last set that I'm using, guys, and this is just on my swap on the 5-piece, is the Combat Physician. And that's my ring, my necklace, my belt, and my shoes, and then finally my offhand axe here. What this set does is max Magicka, spell crit, and then when you critically heal a friendly target, it'll grant them a 5k damage shield for 6 seconds. So not only will you be able to provide a damage shield to yourself with this build whenever you use a heal, keep in mind, guys, we're rocking that 70% crit rate when we're buffed, so this is going to proc pretty much every time you cast a heal. Not only am I going to be able to damage or put a damage shield on myself with this set, but if I want and I heal a friendly target, I can put a damage shield on them as well when I heal them. So this is a great all-around set, not only for yourself, but for group play, especially in PvP. The gear traits that you're going to rock, I think infused on the big pieces is the best way to go. So your legs, your robe, and of course your hat should be infused. Mine's Impen because this is the traits that I have for Iceheart myself, and I couldn't get an infused one. I tried, but I had no luck with it. And then on your other 4 pieces, I would recommend running 4 Divines. Now, I do have Impen again on the second Iceheart piece, and that's just because that was the drop that I got. So 4 Divines is going to bulk up your crit rate. We are running the Thief Mundus, so the Divines definitely are good for the build. And then Infused is going to increase that maximum Magicka, making your casted damage shield. We have 1 damage shield that will actually cast on this build, and it'll make that more powerful, as well as attributing to your damage overall. Having the higher max Magicka value will make you hit harder. Now, Impen on this build, guys, I would not recommend running any Impen. I know I have 2 on, and that's just due to the drops I got, but I don't think you should run Impen with this build. I think Infused Divines is the better option, even defensively, because then you'll have better damage shields and better offense to keep yourself alive, as opposed to being able to take more damage when your shields are down. The enchants on my rings, guys, are all spell damage. Of course, want to deal as much cold damage as we can. And then the weapon enchants are all cold damage as well. We're really playing into the cold damage aspect of this build. It's the most important thing, is that we stack that cold damage. Okay, so let's take a look at the skills we're using. We'll start on the Destro bar. We'll start on the Frost Staff, guys. The first ability we have here is Force Pulse, and this is where you get to see, just in my tooltips, how much higher my frost damage is as opposed to my other magical damage abilities. So my tooltip unbuffed for Force Pulse is over 6k. That's not bad. When I buff it up, I go to about 7k, so a strong tooltip here. Definitely playing into that frost damage effect. Force Pulse on this build is going to be kind of your spike damage attack. It's not going to be your primary attack. You're going to dot your targets up first. Force Pulse is going to be the spike that you use once your target has got all those cold effects on it. The next ability I have here is Frost Reach. I love this ability, especially for PvP. 41 meters range on the Immobilize. You deal the flat 4k damage, and then, of course, the 6k dot over 8 seconds. And it immobilizes your target for 4 seconds. One of the things that this build does really well is it holds people in place. It's a big snare and immobilized build. This is going to be your primary single target snare for the setup. The next ability on the bar here is Harness Magicka. Now, Harness versus Dampen Magicka. For PvP, for most builds, I would say Dampen Magicka is the better one because it is the bigger shield. Harness is going to return your Magicka if you get attacked by it. For this build, I don't have a lot of Magicka sustain at all, and I find that Harness Magicka works better for this setup. Even though it doesn't provide you with as big a shield, you have your other shields proccing off of your healing received and your outgoing critical damage. So Harness is the better intermediate shield in my opinion because it is practically free when you cast it. The Dampen Magic Shield, of course, is stronger, but you just don't have the Magicka sustain to keep that Dampen Magic Shield up on this setup. So Harness, guys, for PvP especially, I think Harness is the much better choice with this build. I tried playing with both, and I liked Harness the most. The next ability on the bar is Blazing Spear. This is not only going to give me a 10% bonus to my critical damage just for having a Adric Spear slotted, but this is the primary stun that you're going to use for this build. Now, I know that Blazing Spear is kind of a wonky ability to use for a stun because it is a casted ability and it takes a bit of time for it to reach your target. I've had a lot of success using Blazing Spear as my distant stun if I follow my Immobilize with the Blazing Spear. So let's pretend this tree is the target, and let's say I shot my Immobilize at it and they're going to be stuck in place. Then what you do is you throw the spear down, and what they're going to do is try to roll out of your Immobilize, and they'll get hit and stunned by the spear then. So that's why I'm loving Blazing Spear for this. Not only is Blazing Spear going to be an awesome stun and a good AoE, it's also going to put that field down that'll proc your Burning Light whenever someone gets hit by it, and also deal a decent amount of damage over time. And then finally, guys, the last normal ability on my Destro bar here is Blockade of Frost. This ability is so strong for PvP. It's a massive, massive AoE Frost ground-based ability. Anyone that runs into it is going to get snared. On top of it, if they run into this and you hit them with any cold damaging ability, including the procs off of your helm, it can immobilize them in your Frost field. They have a chance to get immobilized if they get hit with a cold ability while in this field. So the way that this setup kind of works, especially in PvP, is you will often do the Blazing Spear followed by the Frost Field, and they will land at roughly the same time. So your Blazing Spear will come down and stun your target, or stun one of your targets, and then you follow it up with the Frost Field. And this mixed in with your helmet is going to allow you to pump out a lot of AoE damage on top of being able to have the control and snare from it being Frost-based damage. So the last ability on the Destro bar, as you guys could guess, is the Destro Ultimate. Now, I tried this morph of it, and I tried Eye of the Storm. So the difference between the two is that Eye of the Storm will stick to you when you cast it. This is a huge, huge AoE, a 10-meter radius. The size of this ultimate is the same size as Caltrops. It is massive, and it gives you a huge area of zone control when you use it in PvP. So when you use Eye of the Storm, what it's going to do is it'll give cold effects to everybody. So if they're already sitting in your AoE stuff, it has a chance to snare them. But the important thing about the other morph, I have Rage on here, not Eye of the Storm, but the important thing about Eye of the Storm is that it sticks to your character as you move around. Now, Icy Rage is like Blazing Spear. It's going to be something you cast on the ground, and it's not mobile, so it's a ground-based AoE. But what makes Icy Rage so great, and I think why Icy Rage is probably the best morph of the Rage to have for the Frost Staff, is the fact that it will immobilize everyone when it deals damage. If you get hit by this ultimate, you'll become immobilized inside of it, and you'll have to roll out or break the immobilize. And if you roll out of it and break it, if the ultimate hits you again, it will immobilize you again. So this ultimate will effectively keep your opponent stuck in an immobilization chain until they roll out of it. So if you fight a Magicka-based builds, if you have a couple mages coming at you and you drop Icy Rage on them, they're going to be hard-pressed to get out of it without blowing their stamina bars. So I would say for you guys, it's up to you which ultimate you really want to use. The Destro ultimate is so powerful. The snare off of Eye of the Storm is really good, and the immobilize off of Icy Rage is really good as well. So it's really up to you guys. Finally, the kind of last little bonus of Icy Rage is that it has reduced ultimate cost. It's not included in the tooltip, but the cost of this morph is cheaper than Eye of the Storm. I'm not sure why, it's just how Zenny has it set up. Eye of the Storm's 240 ultimate, and you see Icy Rage coming down to 216 for me. I think it'll go down a little bit more once I rank it up again to rank 4. Okay, so that is the damage bar that you run on this build. It's a casty-based damage bar with tons of AoE. Let's take a look at the dual wield bar, guys. First ability on my dual wield bar, Honor the Dead. This is my heal. I mean, this is a no-brainer. We're using Combat Physician, so I picked just the single target Honor the Dead because that way you know who the shield is going to when you use it off of your Combat Physician. This is a great heal. Templar's mainstay heal. You can't go wrong with this, guys. The next ability on the bar that I have is Repentance. I have this on my bar to help with stamina sustain. I find, especially in PvP, having Repentance is invaluable. It allows you to play your Magicka Templar as a stamina build for a little bit of time if you want to. because you can keep pulling stamina out of dead stuff. So if things start dropping, you get a whole bunch more CC breaks and dodge rolls than you would normally have as things start to die. Another option here is to put Radiant Destruction on your bar for an execute. The one thing that I don't have on this build is an execute. Now, keep in mind, Radiant Destruction is not a frost-based attack, and what I really wanted for this build was it to be a Frostmage, so I didn't put Radiant on it for that reason, because it's not a frost-based attack. But it's totally up to you guys. If you were to run Radiant on this build, I would recommend swapping it out for either Repentance or either for Quick Cloak, which is the next ability on this build. Quick Cloak, of course, guys, this is going to be my speed buff. One thing that this build is not very fast. It's not a quick build. It doesn't move around fast, and it makes up for the lack of mobility by being able to CC a huge amount of players in a short period of time, which allows me to use something like Quick Cloak. Even though I'm not moving that fast with Quick Cloak, if my opponent's moving at 30% movement speed, my Quick Cloak's going to look damn fast to them because they're not going to be able to catch me. So yeah, there you go. On top of it, it'll grant you 20% reduced damage from AoE. This is a Zerging-based build, so you can't be upset about that reduced AoE damage. And finally, the last thing that Quick Cloak is going to do is deal physical damage every 3 seconds for 15 seconds. Now, that may not seem like the biggest deal to this build, but I do have 41% weapon crit, and that Quick Cloak also can proc my Ice Heart, because it doesn't say it has to be a spell crit. You can proc it off of a melee, or you proc it off of a physical or a magical-based crit. The only thing that won't proc Ice Heart, of course, is your heals, because you have to deal damage to get it to proc. So Quick Cloak is a great all-around utility skill for this build, I think. The next ability on my bar is Extended Ritual. Bread and butter Templar right here. You need to remove those negative effects. Not only will it remove those negative effects, but it will heal you every 2 seconds. And of course, it allows your allies to purify themselves, removing negative effects from themselves as well. Now, the other morph of Extended Ritual is always a good option too, guys. For this build, if you feel like you don't need the extra negative effect removal, you can go with Retribution, just to deal a little bit more of that AoE damage, of course, proccing that Ice Heart set. But, as I said, I am a Frost-based build, so I wanted to stick primarily to frost damage attacks, so I went with Extended Ritual for this one. And then finally, guys, Channeled Focus. This is a really important skill for this build. It's going to give you your major physical and spell resist buffs, which is really great, very important buffs to have. And then finally, it's going to give you the equivalent of about 480 Magica recovery while you have this buff on you. So I would recommend, you guys, that you absolutely keep this skill down as often as possible. You looked at the regen for Magica on this build. It is a Magica-based build, and the regen is not very high. So keeping your Channeled Focus down is very important for this setup. And then finally, guys, the last ability that I have on my bar here. Now, this is, again, an ability that's up to you if you really want to run it or not. I went with Ice Comet. And the reason I went with Ice Comet is because, there you go, cold damage. 14,343 cold damage. This is my unbuffed tooltip on it. Definitely not a bad ultimate at all. So the way that I use these two ultimates on this build is when I'm in a large group fight, I'll almost always go for the Destro ultimate because it's more AoE focused. And if I'm in a smaller fight and I want to nuke a single target, I can always call down the Ice Comet for that single target burst. And I think something to keep in mind, guys, is that a lot of my abilities are AoE based, and Force Pulse is a single target ability that'll hit your opponent with 3 separate attacks. So all of this is attributed and important for your Ice Heart set. The more attacks that you're using, like Force Pulse hits you with 3 attacks, gives you 3 different chances to proc your Ice Heart shield. So if I just spam Force Pulse on a target with light attack weaves, I have an 80% chance to proc my Ice Heart. Okay, so let's take a look at the champion points, guys. So we're going to start in the green tree, as always. We've got 69 in Magician, 5 in Warlord, 6 in Sprinter, and 2 in Bashing Focus. I do have a stamina-based ability, so I put a little bit in Warlord. I have to sprint. I am using Quick Cloak to get that movement speed. Of course, sprinting is going to give me the fastest movement speed that I can get with Quick Cloak up. So putting a few points in Sprinter doesn't hurt. And then in PvP, you're going to bash people. That's just how it is. So having a couple points in Bashing Focus doesn't hurt either. Now, the build doesn't have high regen, so a very important piece of this build was to invest in reduced Magica cost. So there you have it. going into reduced Magicka cost, very important for this setup. You get a lot better return than if you go into Magicka recovery. In my lover tree, I've got 5 in Mooncalf, 15 in Arcanist, 10 in Tenacity, and 0 in Healthy. Your heavy attacks with the Frost Staff give you a damage shield, so Tenacity was something I didn't want to overlook at all. Arcanist, of course, bulk up that Magicka recovery just by a little bit by putting a few points in there, and then a little bit of stamina recovery. I am a vampire, so I wouldn't invest in Healthy, but if you're not a vampire, you can always put a few points in there as well. And then in the Shadow Tree, I've got 65 in Tumbling, reducing the stamina cost of Roll Dodge and Break Free. So important for PvP, guys. You're going to get stunned. You're going to have to roll in PvP. So you absolutely need to put a lot of points in Tumbling for any PvP build, I think, unless it doesn't have to break a CC. And then I've got 10 in Shadow Ward, reducing the cost of blocking by 5%, because, of course, you will have to block as well. Okay, so let's take a look at the blue tree, guys. We've got 23 in Blessed, increasing the effectiveness of healing done. 55 in Elemental Expert, increasing my frost damage by 16.5%. That's the big important one here. Flame Shock and Magic, definitely not something to overlook, but this is a frost damage build, and that's why we got the points in Elemental Expert. And then finally, 49 in Elfborn. We've got 70% crit on this build, so Elfborn is something I put a lot of points into as well to increase that critical damage. So with this plus my Adric Spear, I'm sitting at, what is it, 1.5 is the base multiplier for crit. 15% plus 10% puts me at 1.75% increased critical damage on this setup. And then finally, I've got 10 in Spell Erosion to increase that spell pen. Can't neglect your spell penetration. And then in my Atronach tree, guys, I've got 20 in Staff Expert, and that is it. Riposte wasn't really a passive that I needed, so just 20 in Staff Expert, and that's it. Nothing in Melee Weapon Expert at all. And then in my Ritual tree, I've got 30 in Thaumaturge. Increase the damage of your damage over time effects by 10%. And there you have it. All a Magicka Arced-based damage build here. And of course, big focus on the frost damage. The important passive in this build is Spell Precision. This is going to increase your spell critical rating. And then finally, Perfect Strike isn't bad to invest to, especially if you want to proc your Ice Heart set off of maybe some of your physical attacks. If you look at, I have axes on here as well. Ideally, you would go swords for the damage, but it's not such a big deal because if I do land an attack with these axes, it will put the bleed damage on my target, causing my Ice Heart to proc if those bleeds crit. So it's just more kind of damage that you're pumping out, different kind of numbers. The more numbers that you have hitting your target, the more likely you're going to proc your Ice Heart set. So axes, not a terrible choice. Ideally, I would go with swords, but ideally, you know, I'd have to get the drops that I needed, and sometimes that just doesn't happen. And then we're going to take a look at the red tree, guys. We've got 37 in the Steed tree, 29 in Ironclad. Reduce the duration of all snare, fear, stun, and disorient effects on you by 10%. Now, why did you invest into this, Jack? What a good question, guys. The reason I did is because you have so many damage shields on this build. There are a lot of times in PvP, especially on this setup, where you will get stunned and you don't have to break it, especially if you have your harness up already and one of your other shields have procced. You're looking at easily like 13k damage shield over top of you. Most of the time when you've got a damage shield like that on you, you don't have to break the CC. You can just let them try to break your shield, and they probably won't recast your damage shield after the CC's over, and you'll have gotten out of it without wasting resources at all. So this is why I invested into Ironclad. I've got 4 in Spell Shield to buff up that spell resistance by a little bit, and then 4 in Resistant to give me a little bit of crit resist. In my Lady tree, I've got 9 in Hardy, 9 in Elemental Defender. This is going to reduce my physical and my magical damage that I take. 7 in Light Armor Focus to increase my physical resistance when I'm wearing 5 pieces of light or more. And then 5 in Thick Skin to reduce the damage I take from damage over time effects. The important passive in this tree, guys, is going to be Spell Absorption. Restore Magicka when you take Flame Frost, Shock Earth, any magic damage equivalent to 30% of your maximum health. So important. Well, not too terribly, but a great passive to have, helps with that Magicka sustain. And then in the Lord tree, guys, I've got 100 in Bastion, increasing the effect of my damage absorbing effects. This is important. All of my defense in this build is dumped into damage shields, so 100 in Bastion, this is the must in your red tree that you want to invest in. The second most important thing in your red tree is going to be quick recovery to increase the effectiveness of your healing done, because you do have quite a bit of healing power, especially as a Templar. And then finally, 3 in Expert Defender to reduce my incoming light and heavy attack damage. Okay, guys, let's do a little bit of PvP commentary. So, this is a fight I have with Krotha here. Both of these fights are going to be with Krotha. I got them both on the same day. So, we run into this tower controlled by blue. We run up to this floor here, and the first thing I'm going to do is drop my big snare fields and drop blazing spears on top of them. You see, we managed to get somebody in the damage there. I dropped the ult as well for the bonus snare. I managed to get somebody with the ult there, and we just kind of keep this heavy AoE pressure on this staircase. We don't want to let too many people get up, and we don't want to let ourselves get surrounded. This guy's going for the res. I just quickly bash him and interrupt. I get a negate dropped on me by one of the NPCs there. I just kind of take a quick backup, and then I come back down the stairs. It seems like the blues have backed up a little bit too. So in this fight here, you see excellent use of terrain and AoE. These guys are just stuck, you know. You see this Magicka Nightblade, he goes in for his burst there, and they just get stuck on this staircase. Once I throw the snares down, it's really hard for any of them to move out of it without expending a lot of resources. And you see these poor guys, they just get held in place, and Krotha's beating on them, and all I'm doing is dropping more and more AoE down on top of them and snaring the crap out of them. You can see the amount of damage I'm putting out with this build's awesome too. These guys are taking a lot of pressure when I can get my fields down on them. You see the poor Magicka Nightblade, he runs into the back here. We just beat on him a little bit, and he goes down from our combined pressure, and we're left just with these two guys at the entrance here. They're both caught in a snare that I'd thrown out a while ago. We catch him again in snares. Krotha's going talons too. We're going all out with the snares on this setup. These poor guys, they don't get to move. And a big part of this fight here is that we're in the keep. We're using our terrain in order to keep our opponents locked down and caught. So we managed to push them all out of there real quick, and we're left to just kind of take the guards down. So I drop my AoE fields on the guards, and they're slowly melting away. This guy in the back here is trying to heal the guards. He is a Templar. He goes for the Soul Assault on Krotha. I take that as my opportunity to go offensive on him. There's the Blazing Spear into my snare, and he just gets stuck in there. And we put out so much damage, these guys can't even keep up. And then we see my good friend Kitty Whisker here. Those guys go in and kill him. Poor Kitty. And in this last clip here, guys, I'm just going to show you a typical sort of Zerg push with this build. I told you this build was good at group combat and good at Zerging. You see how we got a group of DC players here. They're just kind of healing each other, keeping each other alive. As soon as I enter this fight, the first thing I'm doing is I am spamming my snares and AoEs down. I don't want these guys to move anywhere. They drop a negate on themselves. I think the negate was dropped to prevent my snare fields from holding them still. We got a lightning ultimate on top of us, and they group up on this little corner here, and I just snare the living crap out of them. You can see the EP players behind there. They're still a little cautious of whether or not to push in, but me and Krotha are putting so much AoE damage and so much AoE control on this group of players that they can't just out-heal it. They can't just sit there. We force them to back up. We force them to split up, and it leads to their Zerg demise. You can see on the right-hand corner there, the AP slowly ticking in from people getting kills on them, and we whittle these guys down. So that's kind of an archetype push with this build. It's going to be really good if you play aggressive with your snares and really push into your opponents, force them to move out of the ground that they've established for themselves. Alright guys, that is the end of the build video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a like, and feel free to hit that sub button if you haven't already. So, I guess to close, I stream on Twitch, guys. I do all my build work on Twitch, so you guys get to see the builds before I put them on YouTube in action, and you get to talk to me too. So check me out at JackDanielESO on Twitch.com. Otherwise, have a great day, guys, and I hope to see you again.